Hey, good afternoon. We'll be starting shortly at 2 o'clock, so you've still got time to grab a coffee before we get started. Okay, afternoon everyone. For those that have just joined us, we will be starting the webinar shortly at 2 o'clock, so please bear with us. Okay, good afternoon everyone and welcome to our webinar on this very wet and windy Thursday afternoon. I think we can safely say that summer is officially over. My name's Mike Tansey and from Silver Sands, I'm the Account and Marketing Director. And with me today I have the brilliant Mark Ison, our practice lead. Between Mark and I, we've helped migrate tens of thousands of users onto Windows 11 already, and we're excited to share our tips and tricks with you today. For those that haven't been to a Silver Sands webinar before, I'll run you through just a little bit of housekeeping. So the session is being recorded, a copy of which will be made available to you all tomorrow. For any questions, we're saving 15 minutes at the end of the webinar, but if you want to post your questions as you go so don't forget them, please use the Q&A tab that's at the top of your screen. And finally, just say we're offering a free one-to-one workshop with each of the companies here today. This will be a consultant-led workshop to discuss your Windows 11 migration requirements with Mark or a member of the consultancy team. To take us up in the session, tick the request follow-up box on the 30-second survey. I've posted that in the chat already, and one of our team will be in touch. Before I hand over to Mark, I'll kick off with a short overview to Silver Sands. I see we've got quite a few customers here today. We've also got a few new faces as well. So for those less familiar with Silver Sands around the room, we are Microsoft consultancy specializing in Microsoft 365, cloud and hybrid infrastructure. So those four areas, so firstly it's Microsoft 365, which includes over 50 applications such as SharePoint, Teams and OneDrive to name a few. Microsoft 365 also includes your Windows operating system and enterprise mobility and security for protecting those endpoints and devices. The second area we focus on is Azure and infrastructure, so traditionally helping our customers with their on-premises servers, Active Directories, and SQL environments. And certainly over the past 10 years that I've been with the company, transitioning those customers and their infrastructure into the Microsoft Azure cloud as and when that makes sense to do so. The third area is the Power Platform. So we build, design, and maintain apps, dashboards, and automation processes for our enterprise clients. These help improve business efficiencies and, of course, help eradicate those dreaded manual processes. And finally, we provide a mixture of support services from break-fix support all the way through to managed services. Across any of those technology areas that you see on the screen, the ways in which we actually engage with your business, again, falls into one of four categories. Firstly, it's technical readiness. So this is looking at where you are today, where you want to get to, and helping you bridge that gap. And we do that through workshops, strategy sessions, and design activities. The second area is migration, and what we're focusing on today. This could be a Windows 10 to Windows 11 migration. It could be a file server to 365 migration, or it could be a tenant to tenant migration. The third area is governance, security, and compliance. Really important for any project. It's for protecting your security of your data and obviously keeping your staff safe and legal online. It just has to be a priority. And lastly, it's user adoption and change management. It's a key part of any Windows 11 migration. Make sure that the users are brought on with the journey, that there's correct comms and communication throughout. And that's Silver Sands in the slide. So now pass over to Mark to kick off the webinar. Mark, over to you, please.
Thanks, Mike. Afternoon all. During the session, I'll be going over some of the key stages that you'll want to be including as part of your migration or upgrade to Windows 11. I don't have any demos included, but there are some live slides and AI generated images as we go along. Hopefully you'll enjoy them. Before we start, I just wanted to go over some numbers that Microsoft provided at the end of Q1 this year, and which hopefully sets a bit of a scene. So, as we all know, Windows 10 is going end of life in October next year. This presents a potentially massive challenge for organizations who haven't begun or are still in the early stages of moving to Windows 11, especially for those of you who are looking to achieve or are achieving security accreditations such as Cyber Essentials. There are currently around 30 million Windows devices used in enterprise and education settings in the UK, with around 21 million of those running Windows 10. And that's not to mention any others that could be running something older than 10. Of those 21 million devices, over 11 million aren't actually even eligible for Windows 11, and this is due to the hardware requirements that come along with Windows. This means that potentially 50% of devices could need replacing as part of your migration to Windows 11 over the next year. Now, as with Windows 7, Microsoft will be offering extended security update program. This is currently expected to cost around $61 per device for the first year, with the price doubling each year up to a maximum of 3. Education devices, we're expecting to get a better deal with an expected cost of around $1 for the first year, and again doubling each year up to those 3. Although I must stress that those numbers haven't been confirmed yet by Microsoft. As you can probably appreciate, those last two especially have the potential to have a very big impact on your budget requirements for either the upgrade or even if you're just looking to maintain the status quo. So with all that in mind, we'll move on to discuss what's involved in a migration or upgrade to Windows 11 and the Microsoft tools available to help get you there. So there are 4 main phases that you should be looking to include as part of your wider project plan. And as we go through this webinar, we'll go into each of them in a bit more detail. But at a very high level, it begins with evaluation. So these are the things you need to identify and test before you can really truly understand the level of the task you've got ahead of you. Then moving on to preparation or preparing. Based on your evaluation, you'll need to prepare your environment for the migration or the upgrade. This preparation isn't necessarily going to be limited just to your technology, but also to support to your support staff and users. You're then going to look to create a deployment plan that has realistic and achievable with a realistic and achievable timeline, including key milestones like phase completion and communication releases. And finally, you're looking to deploy, which is implementing the plan that you've put in place and keeping to those timelines to avoid any kind of project slippage. At this point in time, time isn't really on your side, and you need to keep pressing forward with the plan. So the first area we're going to discuss is evaluation, beginning with devices and applications. For those of you unaware, Windows 11 has a handful of basic hardware requirements to be eligible, starting with 64 gig of RAM, 64 gig of storage for the upgrade installation, 4 gigabytes of RAM, UEFI firmware which is secure boot enabled, secure boot capable, TPM 2.0, and a compatible 64-bit processor. Now, while most systems built within the last 5 years or so should easily meet the first of those three requirements, TPM 2.0 and compatible processor are generally the sticking points. There's no 32-bit version of Windows 11, so any x86 processor machines you've got out there, fortunately, there's no entry for them whatsoever. When it comes to the processor, it needs to be an 8th gen or higher if it's Intel, or at least be a Zen Plus model if it's AMD. And even then, Microsoft still ultimately has the final decision on whether it's compatible or not. They do provide a full list of supported processors, and they're constantly updating that as older and newer processors become supported. To understand the eligibility of your estate, Microsoft has three main tools available. There's a Windows PC Health Check tool. This is a standalone app that you can install on any device to view a number of health stats about the device, including Windows 11 eligibility. Endpoint Configuration Manager, or SCCM, or I'll be referring to it as Config Manager as we go through, has built-in reporting for device eligibility, as does Intune through Endpoint Analytics, able to show you the eligibility information of any enrolled device. If you're fortunate enough to be using either Config Manager or Intune at the moment, then you should already have everything you need to identify which devices will or won't upgrade. If not, then while the PC Health Check app is useful, it's not really practical in a corporate environment. I am aware that there are alternatives out there from third parties or on GitHub that can be used to remotely collect eligibility information and report back to a central location, but none of those are necessarily supported by Microsoft, and using third-party tools will likely have a cost associated with them. If you are looking at any kind of GitHub solutions, we just recommend using them with caution. When it comes to applications, fortunately, the days of XP to 7 or 7 to 8 are long behind us, and compatibility between Windows 10 and 11 when it comes to apps is far greater due to them essentially using the same core kernel and design. In fact, Microsoft boasts a figure of around 99% compatibility of apps between 10 and 11. They're so confident, in fact, that if you do have an app that's proving incompatible, then they'll provide assistance and resources through their App Assure program to resolve any issues. But do be warned, if the solution to that incompatibility is that there is a newer version available for you to upgrade to, then they will insist that be completed. That may sound easy to them, but as we can appreciate, that's not necessarily an easy task. In a lot of cases, the reason why these apps are running older versions is because of the back-end infrastructure that also needs to be upgraded as part of it. And then on top of that, any additional or new licensing agreements that need to be created, be put in. Unfortunately, there's no simple Microsoft method to determine if an app is compatible without you completing your own testing or reaching out to the vendor to ask the question. However, again, as with eligibility checking, and will be the case with a number of the elements we discuss, there are third-party solutions out there, but again, come with an implementation timeline and also an associated cost. So, as I've kind of covered off with these two, both of these, the device eligibility and app compatibility, have the potential to have a big impact, not only on your potential rollout timeline, but also the budgets. New hardware, software licenses, and potential infrastructure upgrades all need to be considered and factored into your wider project plan. And that's not just in relation to the procurement time, but also the time it takes to evaluate suitability requirements. It's very rare that if we were going to buy new devices, we would just instantly decide these are the ones we're going to buy. We would tend to look at various different OEMs, bring in different form factors, and decide which one works best for the bulk of the users. All of this could lead to some big headaches when trying to achieve that rollout before October next year. And when it comes to the upgrade or migration, there are ultimately two options available to you: in-place upgrades or wipe and refresh. Now, the most efficient way to move to Windows 11 is through in-place upgrades. Microsoft proved with the free 8.1 to 10 and 10 to 11 retail upgrade process that this is a more than competent method of getting enterprise and education devices upgraded. If you're using Intune, it has dedicated policy set, as you can see, that makes creating a phased deployment as simple as possible. Choose the version you want to deploy, the start and end dates, and how much time you want to allow between each of the releases. Then, if you assign that to all of your devices, Microsoft will randomly select which devices get assigned the upgrade. For example, if you had 100 devices in your environment and select a start and end date over the course of 10 weeks, with a 7-day gap between each group, 10 devices will be selected each week. User experience behavior will then be dictated by your wider Windows Update policy that specifies how long it's available for before automatically installing and subsequently forcing a reboot. Config Manager also gives you the ability to create upgrade deployments through its servicing plan feature. It's not quite as straightforward or automated as Intune and requires you to be a little bit more hands-on when deciding who you do and who you don't want it to deploy it to. It is worth mentioning that you can also take that kind of approach with Intune. You don't just have to let Microsoft randomly choose them. You can obviously add machines to a group as and when you decide that you want to assign it to them. Then lastly, if you don't have access to either of these tools, then good old WSUS and group policy using Windows Update for Business is at hand for you. Regardless of which solution you choose, we strongly recommend implementing delivery optimization settings. This will allow upgrade content to be shared across devices in the same location or behind the same network. It's a solution that's been around for quite some time now and has essentially eradicated fears of the past where big updates going out to lots of devices at the same time might bring the network down. If you're in the fortunate position of looking to replace all of your devices as part of your move to Windows 11, then Microsoft has 3 solutions at your disposal. As with the upgrade option, they utilize Intune, Config Manager, and a third free option in this case. When it comes to Intune, Autopilot has been around for quite some time now and become a pretty solid and proven solution for deploying devices. Starting from a factory delivered image, configuration and customization is then layered on top during the provisioning process, and this allows you to ship devices straight to users without any IT intervention whatsoever. Just bear in mind, it does have some limitations, and depending on your deployment requirements, specifically between a hybrid joining device and an entry joining device. Many would suggest that hybrid joining with Autopilot doesn't work, and while Microsoft do recommend using it for entry deployments, hybrid join can work providing you understand and work within its constraints. Things like having a device tunnel VPN in place and delays in the device synchronization process between Entra and Active Directory are the 2 most common issues experienced when hybrid joining. However, these can be easily remedied by either accepting that the builds need to take place behind or within the corporate within an office or on the corporate network, or using a proven PowerShell script that speeds up the synchronization process when new devices appear in AD. We've successfully implemented this kind of setup for many customers, and they're still following that same process today without any issues. Configuration Manager is and always has been an excellent tool for deploying new devices. Utilizing a task sequence, you can customize almost every step of the build process, which can begin with either an out-of-the-box or custom built and captured image to be able to reduce some on-the-fly deployment time. The last option, which is a free solution called the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, provides a similar task sequence driven approach to device deployment, And in most cases, it actually gets integrated with Config Manager for its additional user-driven and customization options. As I say, it's a free solution, has far fewer infrastructure requirements when compared to Configuration Manager, but doesn't provide the ongoing management that SCCM does. I'm sure that if we could, we would all love to take that new device approach to moving to Windows 11, because it would mean that we could then deliver the new devices alongside the existing ones, giving users a backup option and time to move any kind of data and generally wean themselves off the old operating system. Unfortunately, I'm sure for most of you, this probably won't be an option. If, however, you were to prefer the idea of having a clean device for everyone, even if you're utilizing existing devices, wipe and refreshing of those existing ones could certainly be an option. It's always nice to think that when you're starting with a clean operating system, you're not bringing over any potential issues from the old operating system over onto the new one. If you are going to take that approach, just make sure you consider any local data migration that might need to be in place before you wipe the existing device. Solutions like OneDrive obviously being the primary option for getting that data moved over. Now, the solution which you choose for deploying or rebuilding devices ultimately could come down to what you have in place right now. If you're not using any of these solutions at the moment, then it might be too time consuming to implement and train up your support staff. If you're an MDT or config manager user and you think that now's the right time to an opportunity, and it's a great opportunity to jump to the more modern and dynamic autopilot, it certainly is. But again, just consider if you don't already possess the knowledge and skills in-house, it could be seen as an unnecessary distraction from your main objective of getting the upgrade done. With all of that being said, I must stress that regardless of whether you're going for the in-place, or especially if you're going for the in-place upgrade option, you need to be prepared to rebuild or replace devices. I mentioned at the beginning, there are 11 million devices that can't be upgraded to Windows 11. When they're replaced, you're going to have to deploy them as a bare metal out of the box Windows 11. And even though it's the devices that are eligible for upgrade, there will be some failures along the line. If you happen to be an Intune subscriber and you're taking advantage of AutoPatch, then you could look to offload some of the legwork to identify the problems to Microsoft. But in my experience, they can be quite quick to recommend a rebuild unless the issue is affecting multiple devices. For example, all of a particular model is failing their upgrade. The most common cause of failed upgrades are either due to incompatible drivers or system configuration issues, such as TPM 2.0 being available but not being enabled. And in very rare situations, we see issues due to application compatibility. Finding out the reason why upgrades are failing can be difficult and time-consuming, and you're basically going to need to decide whether it's worth the time and effort to put in to try and understand why it's not upgrading compared to just rebuilding it. You also want to potentially evaluate your management strategy. Microsoft have two options available. Group policy, first of all, a solution that feels like it's been around since the beginning of time. And if I'm honest, when looking at a lot of environments, you could be forgiven for thinking that's the case. Policies for Windows 10 that have been cloned from Windows 8 policies, that were cloned from Windows 7, that were cloned from XP, and so on. In most cases, a lot of these settings and policies are there because no one really understands why they were put there in the first place. And we generally worry that removing them might break something. I'm not saying this is always the case, but it's definitely a common situation that we see out there. We've been discussing and completing group policy to mobile device management, or MDM, policy migrations with customers over a number of years now. And I'd say that the end-to-end process could take anywhere between 1 to 3 months from project initiation through to company-wide deployment, depending on the scale of your current policies. Although Windows 11 may be a new OS and obviously would be great to take advantage of those new MDM policies, it's been built on the foundations of what came before it. So if you do have a deep set of group policies and you don't feel you have the time to migrate, don't worry, you can continue to use them. MDM policies were introduced with Windows 8 and designed to be the successor to group policy. Over the years, it's come on leaps and bounds to the point where it offers almost complete settings parity with group policy, with the exception of preference settings like mapping drives, running login scripts, and setting registry values. The policies were originally provided in dedicated setting templates that have now moved on to a master settings catalog that contain almost every setting you can think of. And even in situations where Intune doesn't provide settings for things like third-party products like Zoom, Adobe, Zoom, or Firefox, it gives the ability to upload the vendor-provided ADMX templates, which can then be converted and deployed as MDM policies. Our recommended approach to MDM is to use the settings catalog to create a single policy for all your user and device settings. This provides consistency across the estate and simplifies the management of settings rather than having to sift through multiple specific setting policies. As we all know, exceptions are always necessary and are subsequently catered for by their removal from that master default policy and then having individual enable and disable policies for that given setting. And this approach has proved highly successful with our customers. Whichever of the two solutions you choose, just bear in mind that Windows 11 does include new features, functionality, and defaults. Windows 10 introduced a lot of security-based features that were optional, that Windows 11 enables by default, such as Secure Boot and BitLocker. And as I'm sure you're all aware, it introduces a massive overhaul in the user experience. Some new functionality comes in the form of apps, which your users might find useful. Clipchamp being a great example. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's a video and content creation tool, and it's actually what I've used to create the screen recordings that you've seen in the presentation and will continue to see. Biggest addition that I'm sure you're all aware of is Copilot for Windows. Now, this shouldn't be confused with the bigger and more powerful Copilot for 365, which requires an additional subscription. Copilot for Windows doesn't integrate with Office or data stored in SharePoint. It's more what you would consider an OS integrated ChatGPT. You can ask it to change your theme to dark mode, but you can't ask it to create you a PowerPoint presentation. When it comes to Copilot, we're encouraging our customers not just to disable it, as quite a few did when it first came out, but instead embrace it and educate your users on how to use it correctly. AI services like this, they're not going to go away. And as time goes on, if you're blocking it, you're only going to see more and more requests to have it enabled. And the migration to the new operating system is the perfect time to start turning on these new solutions rather than having to turn it on later. There are some great use cases out there, including being able to assist users with making simple yet permitted OS user experience changes, enabling dark mode, moving the start menu, asking it for host name or IP address, all have the potential to reduce the frequency in which basic help desk requests come in, or at least speed up things for your support guys when they need to perform some troubleshooting. And all of this comes on top of the standard functionality that you've come to expect of a generative AI assistant. To give you additional peace of mind, enterprise customers have added protection by having commercial data protection enabled by default. This means that any chats, prompts, or responses aren't saved. Microsoft has what they call a no-eyes access on any information that's fed to it, and the chat data isn't used to further train the AI models. This means that if a user was to copy information from a classified document to ask for a summary, it will be immediately discarded at the end of the session. Final area that you're likely to evaluate as part of your migration is whether now is the right time to move from a traditional on-prem domain joined machine over to a cloud native one. Entra joined, or previously known as Azure AD joined devices, it's been a very hot topic over the last few years. The advantages of an Entra joined device include being able to remove your VPN and connection to your on-prem domain, because all your authentication is handled by Entra. All your applications will be provided through SaaS solutions or web apps, and any management changes or configurations that you need to make are implemented over any internet connection. When it comes to the device deployment, as we covered earlier, Autopilot does provide a far smoother and more robust experience when compared to using it for hybrid joining. It's definitely a long-term goal and an essential part of an organization's dream to remove their on-prem infrastructure, data centers, and server rooms. It's just whether now, with the time that we have available to you, whether it's the right time to include it as part of your migration to Windows 11. It is a tough question to answer, and will depend on your situation. To make that jump over to an entry-join device, things like printers, network drives, and on-prem applications and group policy all need to be migrated to group cloud-based services. There are some ways to circumvent that using VPNs and Cloud Kerberos Trust implementations and other solutions like Azure Virtual Desktop to provide users seamless access to those on-prem services as they did before. As for how to move an existing hybrid device to Entra, unfortunately, Microsoft don't provide any tools or automated methods. Their solution is to wipe the device and re-autopilot into Entra. Again, I know there are third-party tools out there, especially from the likes of Quest, that can automate and simplify the process. But as with everything else, if you don't have these kind of things in place, the time, effort, and cost involved might mean that it's just something that has to be put on the back burner until your Windows 11 rollout has been completed. As I mentioned before, as I say, this is definitely a long-term goal, but if your organization isn't ready to turn off domain controllers and on-prem services just yet, then it might not be the best way to spend the time just now. Your short-term goal of remaining supported by upgrading to Windows 11 needs to be the priority. But if you're confident that you don't have that reliance, then definitely something you should consider if you feel that you're confident in being able to redeploy all of your devices within that time frame. So with all your evaluation completed, you should now be in a position to begin preparing your environment. You'll need to implement or configure the solutions that you'll be using to roll out Windows 11. This could be solutions that you're already using, or they might be brand new. Configuring Intune feature update policies, configuration manager service plans, WSUS or group policies for in-place upgrades, or creating new autopilot deployment profiles, or new task sequences for config manager or MDT for those rebuild scenarios. Just make sure that with whatever you're planning to use, that you have your support staff trained up, and so that they're capable to follow those processes and troubleshoot any issues should they come up. Remember, you're not just preparing the technology, but you're also preparing the team that's going to be delivering it. The discovery from your evaluation should have identified any incompatible applications and any steps that you need to make sure that they work in Windows 11. And that could mean upgrading the back-end systems, deploying new endpoint clients or agents. If you've decided that the time is right to move from group policy to MDM, now's the time to start reviewing those group policies and putting together your new set of MDM policies. At the very least, you'll be looking to either create or add to existing group policies or group policies any new Windows 11 specific settings that you'll be needing. And to do this, you need to make sure you download the latest ADMX templates from Microsoft and update your central stores. You'll be looking to start to put together test plans or prepare your test plans. These could be quite far-ranging, including the upgrade process, the new build process, settings, application verification, and application functionality. Determine the steps and processes that need to be followed and what the expected results should be in the form of success criteria. You'll also want this will also be the first opportunity that you'll be taking towards your approach for user communications. These user comms can come in many forms, from simple marketing like emails, letting them know that the upgrade's coming, to detailed guides and visual representations of what to expect before, during, and after the rollout. Although this will be the first time it comes up, these user comms should be seen as a continual part of the project from here on out. Your test and pilot stages that we'll cover in a short while will be the perfect opportunity to gain feedback from your users to help you understand the kinds of information your production users are likely to need or want. Some options to consider are email campaigns, intranet-based FAQs, tips and tricks and user guides, pre-recorded video demonstrations, open house drop-in sessions, or virtual floor walkers. The first set of simple communications should be going out as soon as possible to let users know what's coming and to explain to them why you're doing it. Everyone understands the importance of security these days, but getting your users buy-in is going to be key to a successful rollout. You're also going to want to start selecting your pilot users for the Windows 11 rollout, and you're going to be looking for as broad a range of users and devices from your environment as possible. Unfortunately, the IT team, while I'm sure they're willing, they're not the best pilot users, and they certainly won't be representative of your wider user base. Once you've chosen your pilot users, keep them up to date with progress of the project and potentially arrange regular stand-up meetings with them to discuss any niggles they might be experiencing that don't necessarily warrant a full-blown support call. Getting these catch-ups in diaries as soon as possible is key to prevent conflicting meetings going in and meaning that they're unable to attend them. With all your preparation in place, you can now start putting together an accurate rollout plan with key dates and milestones. Right now, we're recommending to our customers to aim for an early summer completion of the production rollout, so along May, June timelines. As most of you will have experienced over the last few weeks, a lot of users tend to take time off over the summer period, and this leads to large amounts of devices being unconnected and therefore missing their date for the upgrade. Also then gives you a quieter summer period to then complete any cleanup activities like finding any missed devices. Also, with setting a completion rollout date, you can then start working backwards to see what time allowances you have for your other phases. The more time you give yourself, the more likely it is that you're going to have a successful rollout. Your rollout should comprise of 4 main phases, starting with the test phase to complete the final testing of your upgrade and rebuild processes, applications and user experiences on non-user devices. Use your test plans to make sure that you're happy that everything is working as expected. You want to use this time to gain as much knowledge and experience as you can to go towards developing your further user communications and any potential support requirements. We recommend that this phase go on for up to a month, but could be as little as a couple of weeks, depending on your resource availability to run through those test plans. Just make sure you've allowed yourself time and leeway before you start your pilot to make sure that you don't have to delay it. After the test phase, you move on to pilot, and as part of your pilot user selection process, you should already know who it's going to, and you can either deploy that all to all of them in one go or stagger it over the course of a week or two. Ultimately, you want them to experience as real a world upgrade process as possible, because their insights and feedback will be invaluable towards your production rollout users' communication. Depending on the scale of your user base, the pilot phase should take anywhere between 1 to 2 months, and this should give you more than enough time to allow your pilot users to get to grips with the new environment and run through their day-to-day tasks and hopefully identify any issues. As I suggested earlier, complete your regular stand-ups with those pilot users to gain any additional non-critical feedback that you can. We recommend using tools, project management tools such as RAID logs, even if it's just an Excel spreadsheet, to keep track of all of those issues that they've found that you can then review during each of those stand-up sessions. At the end of the pilot phase, you want to conduct a final review session with those users to make sure that that any of those issues that have come up have all been remediated and everyone's happy that you're able to move on to production. As with the test phase, make sure you leave a suitable gap between your pilot and production rollout start date, just in case. At this point, you would have been telling your production users for a couple of months now that the rollout is coming and when it's going to be starting. You need to make sure that you don't have any delay, because because that would obviously prevent setting a bad tone before you even begin. Now, the length of your production rollout really will depend on the number of devices that you need to roll out, combined with the level of support you have available to you. A successful tactic that we've used in the past is to push the upgrade to a department at a time, which allows you to be a bit more strategic with your support and reduces the risk of having to provide that support across multiple areas of the business. But that being said, we've also seen just a successful deployment when using Intune to randomly release the upgrade to a set number of devices each week or two. If you've completed your evaluation and preparation successfully, and your test and pilot phases successfully, you shouldn't be expecting any major issues to come up. What we will say what we do say during the production rollout is try not to get hung up on any problem devices. They can be excluded and picked up later. Avoid putting a complete hold on the rollout if you can, especially if it is only affecting the minority. At the end of the rollout, you then have a cleanup or mop-up phase where you can go back and address those problem devices, whether that be trying to figure out how to get them to upgrade or just by replacing them or rebuilding them. And that's along with any other devices that may have been missed along the way. Once you've started your deployment, keeping to the timeline is key. Said it a few times already, and I'll say it again. You've set expectations with users and for the business for that matter, and delays quickly lead to negativity and doubt around projects like this. We can all appreciate that sometimes the unexpected happens and there's nothing we can do about it. For example, imagine being the guy that started a major rollout of something a few days before COVID sent everyone home. It's just nightmares and things that you don't want to happen. But too often we see rollouts pausing because a couple of devices are failing, or maybe a high priority user device is failing, and everyone starts to panic and puts the whole thing on hold. As I say, if you've gone through all of your preparation correctly, the chances of this happening should be minimal. Once the pilot deployment has started, you just need to take the issues as they come and deal with them accordingly. If it's not a complete showstopper that's affecting the organization, handle it after the rollout. That could involve rolling them back to Windows 10 and excluding them from the rollout entirely until you've figured out what the solution is. Fortunately, with the upgrade process, there are policies that you can add which can determine how long the device will retain a previous installation before cleaning it up. And by default, this is set to 10 days. So within that first 10 days, you can easily roll back. Once the deployment is complete and the dust has settled, if you followed these recommendations, you should have plenty of time to clean up any remaining issues or problem devices that have been missed. There's always devices that slip through the cracks, whether it be to users being on long-term leave or devices that have been left in a cupboard somewhere. So in summary, there are 4 key stages for the upgrade for Windows to 11 that you need to consider, and the common thread across them is time. Time needed to evaluate the estate, your estate devices and apps, the solutions you'll use, the changes you need to make to your infrastructure, and how you'll manage the new platform and user experience, and any features and functionality you do or don't want to include. The time it might take to prepare the environment for the new implementations, changes to existing infrastructure, and developing suitable test plans and user communications. Finally, the time it's going to take to complete your production rollout before Windows 10 goes end of life in October 2025. I hope you found this session useful, and thank you for your time. I'll hand back over to Mike to do a final wrap up and then go through any questions that have come up during the session.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Mark. Really enjoyed the session. Lots of good golden nuggets in there. I really like the part about reviewing your policies so you're not dragging them all the way from Windows 7 through to Windows 10 through to Windows 11 and beyond. And also the bits around Windows Copilot for Windows. I think that's going to be really exciting as well. So we will just make sure to send a copy of the slides alongside the copy of the recording. Just a reminder, we are offering a follow-up session. So if you've liked what you've heard today with Mark, do tick the box on the survey. I'll post that into the chat box as we go. Just tick the follow-up box and we'll be in touch to book that session with you. There has been a few questions, Mark, so I'll run through the Q&A now and get your questions ready as we go. So first question from Tim: will the upgrade to Windows 11 via Intune only work if the device is already on an autopilot device, or does it need to just be hybrid joined?
As long as the device is enrolled in Intune, it will be eligible to receive the upgrade through the Intune policies.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark. Question here from Matt: is there any way to deploy a Windows 11 almost as an app that users can click when it suits them before IT decide it's going to happen for them?
So the best way that you would be able to, so is this, sorry, can you just repeat that question? Is this in relation to the initiating the upgrade or allowing someone to,
I think
view it first?
I think it's more in relation to, is there any way that people can kind of try it out before IT roll it out and maybe even circumvent the process?
So the best way to give users an experience of what it's going to be like is using a solution like Windows 365, which is a cloud-based Windows PC that they'd be able to access and open it and essentially have a go with it to see, to get to grips with it essentially before their device is replaced. But obviously for Windows 365 there is a certain level of cost. If you're looking for maybe a slightly cheaper alternative, then you could look at something like Azure Virtual Desktop and deploying a Windows 11 multi-session version and publishing a session desktop that again multiple users would be able to log on to and get a feel for the experience and look and get to grips with how it's going to be.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. Another question here from Phil: where in Intune or SCCM can I find the hardware compatibility?
So within Intune, it's within the endpoint, it's within report section and then going into endpoint analytics. And there is a Windows report that shows you the eligibility information, which was the screenshot on the slide that we had. Within Config Manager, again within its reporting area, it has a dedicated report for device readiness for Windows 11, and I think from memory there is a dedicated node somewhere within the reporting as well, so it should have already collected that information and be available for you as a report.
Awesome, thank you, Mark. Another question in the chat here: what are your thoughts on using Autopilot V2?
So I'll be honest, I've been testing with Autopilot V2 and I've had a lot of failures. The main benefit to Autopilot V2 is that you don't have to pre-register the device. So at the moment, to autopilot a device, either you or the OEM vendor has to upload the hardware hash into Intune so that it can be recognized. With Autopilot V2, all you need to do is assign the policy to a given user, and when they're at the out-of-box screen, signing in with their corporate credentials, it will initiate the autopilot process. As I say, from my testing, it's been a little bit hit and miss. I'm not sure whether it's technically still in preview or not. I'll have to double check on that one for you. But yeah, I guess the advantage, yes, is not having to. See, some customers have got a agreement with an OEM where they'll upload the hash for them. Not everyone does. They'll have to get the machine in first and upload that before they can send it to the user. And it effectively does cut that out altogether. The potential drawback to that is that if a user was to get a brand new machine themselves and sign in at the out of box, they could potentially enroll a device that you don't own or isn't yours. Obviously, it's not the end of the world because it's still going to be subject to all your configurations and policies, so it will still be secure, but it's just not technically a device that you would have been aware of in the first place.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. A couple of questions coming in direct here. So what's the best way to approach a group policy to MDM migration?
So you want to start off with a review of your current group policies. To begin with, look at the ones that have got applied to it, that you're applying to everyone. Exception policies, they will always be there, but as I kind of mentioned earlier, sometimes they're there, but we're not necessarily sure why they're there, or they're only applied to a few people. And it's always good to this is your opportunity to reset the deck, really, and you might be applying an exception to someone who actually might not need it anymore. So put those to the side for one now, unless you to the side for now, unless you definitely know they need to be there. You can then take those policies and you can use group policy analytics in Intune to upload those policies, and it will immediately provide you with supportability with MDM. So that's kind of the first bit. At that point, you'll also want to, you could either then simply choose the settings that you want to migrate, and that's all fit within, all kind of pre-baked into the group policy analytics feature, where you can tick the settings you want to migrate and migrate them over. You could obviously just select all of them and it will put them into a settings catalog for you. We would suggest taking the time though to review those settings. Just because it's supported in MDM doesn't mean that you want to bring it over again. It's this opportunity to forget what was being done in the past and start anew. And you might also want to look at removing security-based features from your policies as well. And if you're going to be looking to, obviously, MDM, you're going to be using Intune and looking to use the security baselines that they offer, which is going to give you instant best practice security configurations. Those obviously new settings and any security baselines would obviously all need to be tested to make sure they don't impact your kind of users' day-to-day work. There are then some other settings that you might want to take out, things along the lines of BitLocker, account protection, and firewall, mainly because they have their own dedicated policy areas within Intune, and then use Intune filters or entry groups to assign those policies to a select group of machines and go through a similar test, pilot, production rollout kind of process, similar to what we've discussed for the Windows upgrade.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mark. Two-parter from Sarah. How long does an in-place upgrade take? Part one. And how common is it for an in-place upgrade to fail?
So as far as how long it takes for an in-place upgrade to take, there are three main stages of that process. First of all is the download. And that could, how long's your piece of string? It ultimately depends on your internet speeds that are available to you at the time. But during that download, users shouldn't notice anything happening. It will just work in the background, user carry on working. Then it will do the installation. So the download will happen. It will tell the user that that the upgrade is ready. They then press the install, or if the availability time elapses, it will just go ahead and install itself. And that installation process could take anywhere from maybe half an hour up to an hour or two. There's a lot of factors at play during that stage, because it's considering things like the overall device performance and available resources at the time, and also the amount of data and apps that need to be migrated as part of that process. But again, while that's happening, might see, if they're on a Teams call, they might have the odd kind of stutter or maybe slow down. Generally, they shouldn't notice that it's happening while it's doing the installation. And then after the install, the most inconvenient stage, let's say, to the user is the reboot. With this part, make sure that you've prepped your users as much as you can, because I guess, we probably all had it too much where people have said that my machine has rebooted for an update in the middle of a meeting, or I just started a presentation. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
We know, especially if you were using Intune, they are notified that the upgrade is that they need to restart, and they'll be given a grace period before it automatically happens. So, educate them. It could take anywhere between 5 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour. Again, there's a lot of factors at play. It shouldn't take that long. Generally, we've seen maybe around 5 to 10 minutes. But tell them that when it shows that that the reboot's needed, try and do it during your lunch break, so that it's not going to inconvenience them. Try to get them to do it before it just automatically happens. But as I say, the reboot hopefully only take maybe 5 to 15 minutes. And that's essentially because when the install's happening, it's basically installing the new version side by side with the old version. So it creates the new image, migrates what it can over into the new one, and during that reboot, it's just doing the final tidy up tasks. That's what allows you to be able to roll back to that previous version. Think of it almost as having two virtual machines running at the same time, dual booting. It's just changing the boot order and then switching it over, and then obviously it will go and clear it up afterwards.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. Really good answers there. And thank you, everyone, for your questions. I think, bear with me 2 seconds, I think we've got one more that's come in. Is BitLocker suspended during the upgrade?
You won't necessarily notice it, but yes, it would be. If your devices are BitLockered at the moment, you shouldn't have to worry about it coming back up and coming up at the recovery screen. Yeah, I mean, even general Windows updates, you shouldn't be experiencing that problems. So yeah, you'd like to think that Microsoft have covered their bases from that side of things. So yes, if it's BitLockered on Windows 10, you won't see any messages. It won't necessarily let you know, but once it comes back up with Windows 11, it will remain BitLockered without any impact on the user.
Brilliant. Another great question there, Phil. Thank you very much. Perfect. If there are any other questions, post them now and we'll pick those up. If you don't want to post your question in the public forum, do feel free to contact me afterwards, and we can certainly set up either the one-to-one or answer your question on email. But I think that's everything for today. So, Mark, thank you very much again for a brilliant webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you very much. See you at the next event.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.